Okay. Mishnah tet. Bi'ur Mishnah tet. Keitzad shaveh lechaya. So the first thing we're going to see, what's the similarities between a koi and a wild animal? Keitzad shaveh lechaya. Keitzad machmirim bekoi kedin chaya. How are we going to treat a koi like a chaya? Oh, so the first example that we gave before, damo ta'un kisui kedam chaya. We say domestic animals, we don't cover the blood, but wild animals we do cover the blood. So when it comes to a koi, we're going to what? Cover the blood. Katuv b'Torah, it's written in Torah, ve'ish ish mibnei Yisrael, and man from the sons of Israel, umin hager agar betocham, and from the converts that lives amongst them, asher yatzud. Notice what it says. Yatzud means that it's a wild animal. Yatzud side, he's going to go hunt chaya or off a wild animal or any kind of bird, asher yochal, that is going to allowed to be eaten, veshafach et damo, and he poured out his blood, vekisau be'afar, and he covered it in earth. Mikan lelumedim, from here we learn, shashochet chayat teora, that if one slaughters kosher wild animals, or off the or any bird which is kosher, wild or not wild, chayav lechasot et damam lachar hashchita. He is obligated to cover their blood after the slaughtering. Aval hashochet be'ema en dama ta'un kisui. But if one slaughters domestic animals, one doesn't need to cover the blood. Sharei ne'emar chaya off, because it says wild animal specifically, or birds. Ubekoi machmirim, so in a koi, if you shecht a koi, what do? Shedamo ta'un kisui dam kechaya, that you have to cover his blood. Beram, but we have the problem now. What about the blessing?
Safek.
Oh, safek. So safek brachot. No brachot. Lehakel. Beram ein mevarchim al kisuyo, because it is a doubt whether it's an animal or not an animal. It doesn't. So you don't make a blessing. Kivan shesafeku, because it is safek. Oh, and because of that, we have a problem. We know that we're allowed to shecht on Yom Tov, because the meat, which is fresh, fresh meat is much better than old meat. So one is allowed to shecht on a Yom Tov. So over here we're going to see, we're not going to let you shecht the koi on a Yom Tov. So what's the problem? I can shecht chickens, I can shecht my wild animals, I can shecht any animal on a Yom Tov. Maybe not wild animals. We'll see soon why. ואין שוחטים אותו ביום טוב. And we're not allowed to shecht him on a Yom Tov. Why? כלומר, והואיל ואינו טעון כיסוי אלא מספק. It says, if it was a wild animal, then
you couldn't shecht it.
I think you could. Why not? The problem with I think you're allowed to. Wild animals, for sure, you're allowed to. So any animals you're allowed to, but you're not allowed to do the koi. We see soon why. ואינו טעון כיסוי אלא מספק, since the covering of the blood by a koi is only doubt, לפיכך אסור לשחטו ביום טוב. Therefore, one is not allowed to slaughter him in יום טוב. מפני שאין יכולים לקיים בו מצוות כיסוי הדם. Because you're not allowed to fulfill, you cannot fulfill in it the commandment of covering the blood. שאסור לטלטל את האפר ביום טוב לצורך כיסוי דמו. Because you're not allowed to take earth in order to cover the blood, because the earth is muktzeh.
אבל if זה היה off.
Oh, if it was an off, the earth is not muktzeh for it.
Why?
It's the same thing, for example, in your yard, right? Your yard in your house. Yeah. You have chicken on Yom Tov. You're allowed to play around with the chicken, with the goats. Why? Because you're allowed to eat them. So you're allowed to touch them. But the dog, you're not allowed to touch on a Yom Tov.
It's not food.
It's not food. So the same thing over here. The koi, the wild animal, I'm allowed to shecht. And so the earth for the wild animal is, and since it is required to shecht, the earth is required for that, I'm allowed to. Over here it's a doubt whether I'm allowed to. So it says, hey, since it's doubt, we're afraid you're going to take it, and we don't want you to take it because it's doubt. You're not allowed to take it, so don't shecht. Don't shecht. In the wild animal I'm allowed to shecht, but the koi, don't shecht on a Yom Tov. Yeah? Choose effect. So let's say the guy forgot, and he did shecht him. He says, I forgot. I was shechting the goats, and then there was the koi amongst them, and I didn't think, and I shechted him also. Mistake. So now the question is, after the fact, should I cover the blood or not? Ve'im shachato b'yom tov, and if you slaughtered him yom tov, en mechasim et damo. It says, and that now you're not going to, because it's muktzeh for you. It was muktzeh from the beginning.
Begin with.
Me'atam shebe'arnu la'il, from the reason we mentioned above. ואף על פי שאפר קירה מוכן הוא, and even though you prepared the afar from Erev Yom Tov, you have like in your fireplace, you prepared it from beforehand, מוכן הוא לבדי, you prepared it for what? You prepared it for permissible things, not for safek things. It was prepared in your mind for things that you're allowed to do, not for things you're not allowed to do. And over here, you're not allowed to do that. So it wasn't prepared. Mukhan levada, it was only prepared for a chaya or an off. It wasn't prepared for something that you knew you're not supposed to. Ve'ino mukhan lesafek, it was never prepared for a doubt. Ve'yesh mefarshim, there are those who explains, שאפילו היה לו עפר מוכן מערב יום טוב, even if he had dust ready, earth ready from before יום טוב, לשם שחיטת הקוי, even if your mind you had it, I'm going to shech this koi, אסור לו לכסות את דמו. You're still not allowed to cover the blood. מחשש שמא יאמר הרועה, ודאי חיה הוא, ויביא להתיר חלבו באכילה. Because maybe somebody is going to see you, Mari sign, and he's going to say, oh, this is a chaya, and therefore I'm allowed to eat the chelev. Because chelev, the fat, there's a part of the fat that you're allowed to eat by wild animals, but you're not allowed to eat by domestic animals. And this one is in between. We're going to have the chumrah of domestic animals maybe when it comes to the chelev. So, and the guy sees you put the afar on it, he's going to think, oh, this is a chaya for sure. So if it's a chaya for sure, I'm allowed to eat the chelev. That's a problem. So just because of Maris Ayin, we're not going to let you. וחלבו אסור כמבואר להלן. And his fat is forbidden, like we're going to explain above, even though it's half a chaya, it's still half a behema. And that's why the fat part is prohibited. שתי ההלכות האחרונות, the last two laws, אינם עניין לדרכים שהוא שווה לחיה. These are not how it is similar to a wild animal. אלא נשנו כאן אגב הדין של כיסוי דמו, שנראה ברישא כמו שאלה. The reason why they mention over here is because it's a continuation of the blood. Okay? Let's continue. וחלבו מטמא בטומאת נבלה כחיה. And his fat makes impure, like the tuma, like the impurity of a dead animal, just like a chaya. So let's understand.
חלבו של הקוי?
חלבו של הקוי, yeah. He's going to explain. שכן חלב של נבלת בהמה טהורה אינו טמא. So if you have a חלב of a kosher animal that is a nevela, is not kosher anymore because it was shechted the wrong way, for example. So that chelev of a kosher animal doesn't become tameh. The fat doesn't become tameh. Shekatuv.
Even though you shecht it wrong?
The chelev itself is not tameh.
Right, but even if you shecht the behema wrong and then you take the chelev from it?
I think that's what it is.
Okay.
Nevela. I think that's what it's called nevela. Okay. I don't think it means nevela that you shechted kosher. Yeah, but we see soon. Vechevel, it was shechted the wrong way. Or another animal, a lion ate it, for example. A lion killed it. It was killed non-kosher.
Okay.
Vechevel, nevela, vechelev, trefa. Trefa is by a lion. The chelev of nevela can also be an animal that after you shechted it, you checked the inside and you saw that it's no good. Yeah. Chelev, nevela, vechelev, trefa. the fat of a nevela, יעשה לכל מלאכה. You're allowed to do it for any kind of work. So in other words, you're allowed to use it to oil your gears. If whatever they used for oil for, the fat for.
Right.
Whatever. And the question is, since it is a nevela now, maybe it's mitame, it's going to make things pure like a nevela. So it says, no, the chelev is not. It does not make things impure. Why? Because you're not allowed to eat it anyway. It's not part of the animal. It's not for free. Only things that you eat can make other things tame. This is not allowed to be eaten. So therefore it's just like the hoofs. The hoofs is not metame. And things that you don't eat are not metame. So this is not metame. Ve'achol lo tochlu. So you're not allowed to eat. You're not allowed to eat it, but you're allowed to use it and it's not metame. ומכאן למדים, and from here we learn, שחלב של בהמת תורה, that the fat of a kosher animal, שאסור לאוכלו, that you're not allowed to eat it, אינו מטמא בטומאת נבלה, does not impurify like a nevela, like a killed animal, not kosher way. אבל חלב של חיה, but the fat of a wild animal, what's the difference? Since you're allowed to eat it, therefore it's going to be metame if you're going to put it on your sock, on your shoes to make them metame betumat nevela kechaya. It's going to make metame. Vetom'ato besafek. And is it for sure tame? It's not for sure tame. It's half. Yeah. וטומאת החלב של נלוות הכוי אינו לה מספק שמא בהמה הוא. Okay. Good. One more thing about the koi that we're going to learn. So we know the rules of donkeys are very strange. It's the only non-kosher animal that if you have a firstborn of a donkey, you have to give a sacrifice.
Sheep.
That's right. You have to exchange it with the sheep. So, or a goat, right? So over here, you remember we said that one of the opinions is that the koi might be considered to be a sheep, from the sheep animal. It's like a sheep, a goat that you bring together with a tzvi. So it says, so maybe you can bring on the mizbeach the koi. Now for sure you can bring the mizbeach on the koi, it's a kosher animal. There's no question if it's kosher or not. There's a question if it's
a behema or chaya.
It's a behema or chaya. Ve'en podim bo peter chamor. And you do not redeem with it the firstborn of a donkey. Shene'emar, because v'chol peter chamor tifde baseh. It says the firstborn of a donkey, you're going to exchange it with the sheep. And we say sheep and goats are the same, you remember. Gdise, we learned it already. Aval lo bechaya, but you're not allowed to exchange it with the wild animals. ולא בקוי שהוא ספק חיה, and not in koi that it is doubtful if it's a wild animal. יש מפרשים משנתנו, דעתו זולן המשנה, לדברי האומר שקוי זה הבא מן התיש והצביה. So it says, because we're saying, this is according to those who say that the koi is a seh. A taish is a goat, which is also a seh. The combination of taish and צביה. היינו ספק seh. ולכן באה המשנה להשמיענו שאין פודים בו פטר חמור. Therefore the Mishnah comes to tell you, even though it may be a seh, we're still not going to allow you to do it. If it's a different animal completely, like the first two opinions, then for sure you're not allowed to do it.